Joe is the assistant mayor of Portsmouth and the first Black person to be elected to Portsmouth City Council and the first Black assistant mayor in the state of New Hampshire. She is also the owner of Cup of Joe Cafe and Bar in downtown Portsmouth. Having grown up with her grandparents and as a ward of the state, Joe is determined to make sure everyone has access to a fair future. Joe's passion for nonprofit and advocacy work is demonstrated through her service as a board member for organizations such as Seacoast African American Culture Center, Strawberry Bank Museum, and 603 Forward Foundation, and as founder and president of the New England BIPOC Cultural Festival. In her talk today, Joe will share her two distinct and parallel identities and her story of navigating an existence in the space between. Creative Mornings, please welcome to our stage my friend, Joe Kelley.
Hello, everyone. Is this mic position okay? Everyone can hear me? Awesome. I am going to start a timer because as some of you who know me know I'm a little bit chatty. And so I like to make sure that I can stay in motion. There we go. Okay. Thank you so much for everyone for being here. I'm very, very excited. Today, or to prepare for today, when I was asked to speak and given the theme of parallels, I kind of went through my Rolodex of what to talk about. And I was really torn between two subjects. One of them was growing up in poverty and now being one of the few family members in my family to escape poverty. That's not my alarm. And how that affects my day-to-day life. And I was leaning towards that originally because I felt like it was a topic I hadn't covered. But then I took a minute and I thought about where we are as a country and where we are as a nation and my responsibility. And so then I thought that I have to have a discussion that I've had a lot about, which is race. And so today, what we are going to hear about, or what you're going to hear about, I hopefully know what I'm going to say, will be of this little girl right here. Oh, is that one more? Two more. Okay. So, as mentioned in my intro, I grew up right here in New Hampshire. I was born in Massachusetts, but moved to New Hampshire when I was about 6 months old, and it's the only place I've really ever lived. And you can see from these adorable pictures here, I probably should have been a Gerber baby. But I want to start with a little conversation about what we see that might be different in these photos. Of course, we see adorable me and adorable cousins. And then at the bottom left, that is my mom. And does anyone know where that location is? Can anyone? 5, 4, 3. Yes, Memorial Bridge. Yes, I know, look, a cute little Afro JoJo. But one of the things that we may kind of sit in our discomfort to talk about what is different in that photo is that there's really only one minority, me. I grew up with 15 first cousins on my mother's side. I'm the only person of color. My grandparents on my mother's side immigrated to the U.S. from England and Ireland in the 1900s. And I know that because I found the records. I actually have the records, and I'm visiting this year my great-great-great-great-grandfather's baptismal records in Lancaster, England in 1883. What I don't know is my dad's side. I don't know my dad. But even if I did, like many African Americans in our country, would I be able to trace our ancestral roots more than 3 or 4 generations? Highly unlikely. And I talk about this because I grew up not knowing that I wasn't white. I grew up in this family where race wasn't discussed, wasn't ever talked about. It was joked about sometimes. You know, I stayed a little bit longer in the oven, but it wasn't ever discussed. Which, granted, you have to remember my grandparents raised me, so in the 90s and up until the mid-2000s, that was a culturally acceptable joke. Now, we would get booed off the stage. But it was the joke that I always lived with, and the reality I lived with, which was I was just a little bit darker. Now, my grandparents have passed on, and before they passed on, we were able to have a lot of deep conversations. In reality, my grandparents were a little bit racist. And when I say a little bit racist, I mean pretty racist outside of me. And they grew up in Massachusetts, in Irish, Polish areas in Worcester, Massachusetts, and it was very divided. I think sometimes we like to think that New England was above segregation and above racism, but in reality we know that at least in Massachusetts, Boston has one of the biggest wealth gaps for minorities and white citizens. So this was just who they were. Didn't mean they didn't love me, but I think it really meant that they were not able to accept that part of me. So again, cute little photos, but we have to sit with this discomfort sometimes, because I know a lot of people looked at that photo and said, I know what is different, she's different, but didn't feel okay to say it. And one of the things I want everyone to take away is that it's okay to talk about people's differences. It's okay to talk about the fact that I'm biracial and black and my family isn't. One of the things that I like to always talk about with people is that I use the terms black and white as descriptors. Because when I'm going to pick up my niece, who is adorable, I don't have a picture, but who is adorable but is blonde-haired and blue-eyed, I have to say, that's my niece. I know she's white. Or when I discuss my grandfather, who was a Mason here in Portsmouth, I automatically understand, and it's an understandable thing to me. When I say, oh, Bob Knowles, I understand that people's first reaction, and it's not a bad reaction, is to think about some black people they may know. And I have to say, no, he was white. And then they're able to put that picture together. But again, I think what I want everyone to understand, at least for me, and I can only speak about me, right? And we all know that. We can only speak about our own realities, our own truths. To me, the terms black and white are defining factors. They're just constants, because when I was growing up, as we see, I'm the only one. Now, not so cute face to the right, but these are my grandparents who raised me with my cousins. And again, this is where I'll get into the parallels also of poverty. We grew up in Rochester. To the left, there's 4 of us, and the majority of the time there were 4 of us. And we lived in it. At that time, I thought we had a big house, right? Because compared to my other family members, those still in Massachusetts or in Manchester, we had a great house. In reality, a few years ago, I went on Zillow to look, and we grew up in an 833 square foot condo, including the garage. And at times, there were 5 to 6 of us in multiple bunk beds. Now, the picture to the right, I'm probably in like around 7th grade. And that is when the world told me that I wasn't white. Not my family, not myself, not the mirror. That is when I came home, because Alex, I'll leave his last name out, a fellow 7th grader called me the N-word. And I don't really think he even knew what it was. But I went home to my grandparents, who now as an adult I can understand were ill-equipped for the conversation. And I said, what is this? So-and-so called me that. And I'll never forget, my grandmother turned around so quickly. She said, you're not one of them, so it doesn't matter. Now to her, to some degree, there's a probability that a lot of the black people and African Americans she's met were one of them. But to her, I was not. I wasn't black. I couldn't be that negative, so I couldn't be one of them. And so it led to a lot of complex situations in my life. Not wanting to date black men, not having a lot of black friends, not feeling like I knew what to do with my hair. If you see this picture on the right, it maybe looks like a comb back. No, that was my grandfather's buzzers, and that was what my hair looked like for the majority. And if I'm sure the women in this group can understand that going through that very awkward phase in life, and being one of the only people in my graduating class from high school of almost 600 people as a person of color, not knowing what to do with my hair, not feeling pretty. I'll never forget when I first went to college and then dated my first black man. I was like, I get it, I'm not as pretty as the other girls. And he said, you're pretty, you're just not white. And you grow up here, and you see blonde hair, and you see straight hair, and you think that that is the most beautiful thing in the world. And so you strive for that. And I remember sitting in that fact for a moment that I had to say, well, then what do I think is pretty? I don't know if I think that an afro is pretty. I don't know if I think cornrows are pretty. And so I had to really sit within myself. And then comes this interesting phase of life. Years later, after doing all of this work, We all know the George Floyd and kind of, I call it the reinsurgence of the racial justice movement. And so in 2019, when I first ran for city council, some of you may not know that I lost my first time by 50 votes. I decided just to run because I was young and didn't really know what was happening in our city and really didn't see anyone that looked like me going through the struggles I was going through, representing me up on that podium in City Hall as a small business owner, as a minority, as a waitress at the time, and everyone kept talking about workforce housing in our service industry, and I said, well, you're not one of us, so let me do this. Anyhow, fast forward, somehow this girl who didn't know she was Black has now been propelled to leading and spearheading with others the Black Lives Matter movement in her town. And it was such a weird space for me because I still to this day, and in those moments said, well, am I Black enough for this? Am I the right person for this? Who's deciding that I have to do this? But I did it. And one of the best things about that was that it opened me to a group of Black people that I didn't know existed in this area and that they didn't know I existed. And it became this really beautiful joining together. But as everything, there's two sides of a coin. And then there's the other side of it, where again, I was faced with my racial identity. This is a message, I decided only to conclude one because they got pretty nasty. This, as you can see, someone says to me, are you really Black? And it's a question I have to ask myself all the time. Am I really Black? What defines Black? Who are you to define my Blackness? Or, on the counter, my whiteness? And I think that that's the part of it that is hard in the conversation, is that I always say to people, if I rob a bank tomorrow, hopefully I won't, pretty identifiable, one of the first things that are just gonna go out is Black female. So who are you to say, am I really Black? What is really Black? Is it a music? Is it a culture? Is it where you grow up? I'm just as Black as Barack Obama, literally. But I also am just as Black as everyone you've ever seen. But I'm also just as white as everyone in this room. So it became this really big question. And then I got elected. And then it was remarkable. And there was a conversation of, am I the first? We think I'm the first. Who knows? And as far as the newspaper says, I'm the first. And the city clerk. We did call the Secretary of State. But as you can see from this, the screenshots, well, there's Declan. He's so great. But this article went viral. I had friends, parents in Seattle that saw this article. The AP picked it up. And then came more and more death threats. And people saying, we don't care that you're Black, or it doesn't matter that you're Black, or, unfortunately, becoming a target to hate groups. And again, it became this question of who gets to determine my identity. I didn't make that headline. While I'm so proud to be the first person of color in the state and the first African American to take on that role, that is not why I got this role. But it's a proud moment for everyone to be able to look up and say, wow, that could be me. And being the first of anything is very scary. And I remember I got backlash from this article. And I called one of my cousins. And again, remember this with the light that in my family, race wasn't a thing, which is insulting in reality, because it's all part of who we are. Our backgrounds, our lineage, our ancestry is all part of who we are. But I called my cousin and I was really upset. And she said, well, isn't Black being your shtick now? Yeah, that was my reaction too. And I said to her, I'll leave her name out, I said, I understand to you, maybe I've never been Black because it's not a good thing, but I am. And this is my reality, and I'm trying to share this with you. And so if you can't empathize, I'm gonna call somebody else. And I did, I called my Aunt Norma, she was great. But again, got me to this question, well, who gets to define me? Is it the people that have known me since birth? Is it the people I meet in this room today? Or is it me? And in that reality, it's me. And it gets to ebb and flow. It gets to some days I feel really proud in my Blackness, and some days I'm really shy away from it. On St. Paddy's Day, I'm 100% Irish, even though I'm 52%. I know. But it really gets to be an ebb and flow. And so, again, I picked this conversation to have because I think we need to have more of that conversation. That race and identity, especially in today's world where things are under attack, is an ebb and flow. And so, I dived in. You'll see here, I helped found the first African American Black Caucus for the New Hampshire Democratic Party. I hosted events and TED Talks, or Town Talks, and really dove in to this part of my life, to the Black part of my life, to helping represent that community and learn more about that community and identify with that community. And it's been hard, and it's been easy, and it ebbs and flows. And it allows me, it's really funny, I joke with my husband all the time, if you listen to my playlist on Spotify, it is everywhere. You'll hear a Tupac song, and then you'll hear Faith Hill. And then, I don't really do 80s alternative, no offense guys, I'm a 90s baby. But it is really a good way, and I always say to my friends, like, let me put on the music so you can hear the different sides of my personality. You will see me at a Black Lives Matter award dinner or event, or fundraiser, and then you'll see me on the back of my motorcycle up in Laconia at Bike Week. Because it is a true story. I love it. I drive a motorcycle, sometimes you'll see me around town. But it is the two sides that get to define me. The side that I was raised in, which was pretty backwards rednecky. Literally, I've been on the back of a motorcycle since I was 4 years old. I hunted, I fished, I held the Fishing Derby award at Farmington Fish and Game for about 15 years. I don't know if it was really that long, but for a couple years. I grew up, my grandfather was a hunter and fisherman, and that's what we did, and so those are the memories of my childhood. I joke now that I refuse to hike because before I was 14, I had to hike all 48, and now I don't need to see it again. The memories are there. But again, it's the parallels. I can't tell you how many times when I told people that I was running for city council, they said, but where are you from? And I said, here. And I always include that photo of me as a little baby on the Memorial Bridge because I've been here my whole life. Also, that's one of the only photos I have with my mom. I have about 4, and that's one of them. But I always include it because we look at people of color and think that there's no way that they could be from here. But more and more people are from here. As some of you may remember, a few years ago, my shop and other shops in this community were tagged. And what you may not know, because it kind of falls out of the news story, is that that kid who tagged swastikas around our community was from our community. He grew up here. He went to school here. We're not immune to these things. And I'll never forget, I was up at City Hall and a reporter from like MSNBC, not MSNBC, like whatever the W something station, I don't watch the news a lot, in Boston said, well, does this make you want to just pack up and leave? And I said, and go, I actually was a little extreme. I said, I was born here, I will die here. And I know that part made my grandfather really proud. But I said, we need to get away from this narrative that people of color are implants. People of color have been here. In the beginning, I talked about how I knew my grandparents, or my great-great-great-grandparents came here in 1912. Well, in reality, the likelihood is that on my dad's side, they were here hundreds of years before. But yet, we know, in today's world, they're being pushed out. They're saying they're not true Americans. And so again, in diving in, I made some distinct choices over the last few years. On the left, don't really like that photo of me, but I put it in. When I knew that I was going to be able to have a chance to meet President Biden and have my picture taken with him and attend an event, I put braids in my hair. Because it's important to me that in 20 years or in 2 years, when little girls who look like me see my photo, they can see a hairstyle that they would wear. And on the right was my most recent campaign, and I made sure I had curly hair. Because again, it's identity. And especially in the Black world, hair is identity, and it changes all the time. But I wanted to make sure that in the public, I was representing myself the same way I feel about myself in private. And I made sure I put that out there. And these two photos, and especially the one on your right, I didn't really love. I don't necessarily always love myself with curly hair. And whether that was ingrained with me as a child, being told that my afro wasn't pretty, or that it looked messy, or whether that's just me. And then came the pinnacle of all of it, and I have 1 minute left. And this is the New England BIPOC Fest. And this is where, thank you, this is where my world collided with my good friend Jen, but so many other people. In 2021, myself, Dave Vargas, and Evan Mallet, I hope you know those names, and then joined by Maureen Collins afterwards, started the New England BIPOC Fest because we wanted to give voice to the identities of people of color who lived in this community their whole lives and owned restaurants and businesses and identities and had families here. So we started this festival, and it started at Vita Cantina, and we had around 700 people and maybe 20 vendors. And we wanted to make sure we made a difference. And so we didn't charge our vendors, unlike a lot of the festivals that you see. And we also did something very different. We paid people of color for their time. So we did stipends. And so now, 4 years later, we're planning our fourth one. Last year we got so big that we moved to Strawberry Bank, and we had almost 5,000 people. And we raised, thank you. And we raised over $50,000. Thank you to Service Credit Union, who's one of our biggest sponsors. But what we were able to do was grow this festival that started in a little parking lot to this huge festival that represents all of New England. We have all of the states represented, and we bring in cultural experiences from the Indonesian Cultural Center to the West African drummers to jazz musicians to mariachi bands to Hawaiian dancers, and we allow people to understand that this is nothing new here, that these people have always been our neighbors, they will always be our neighbors. And in reality, someone said to me, oh, so this is a festival for people of color. And I said, it's kind of the opposite. It's a festival for white people. So they can experience the culture that's already here. And so with that, I thank you for your time. I thank you for being open. I thank you for thinking maybe a little bit differently when you walk out of this room. And I thank you for showing up on August 17th at Strawberry Bank from 12 to 5. We are accepting sponsorships. Thank you guys so much.